1,000 miles ahead, the band of twilight was hurtling toward them. Behind, the sun was sinking swiftly into the Jovian clouds. Its rays spread out along the horizon like two flaming, downturned horns, then contracted and died in a brief blaze of chromatic glory. The night had come. And yet, the great world below was not wholly dark. It was awash with phosphorescence, which grew brighter minute by minute as their eyes grew accustomed to the scene. Dim rivers of light were flowing from horizon to horizon, like the luminous wakes of ships on some tropical sea. Here and there they gathered into pools of liquid fire, trembling with vast submarine disturbances welling up from the hidden heart of Jupiter. It was a sight so awe-inspiring that Poole and Bowman could have stared for hours. Was this, they wondered, merely the result of chemical and electrical forces down there in that seething cauldron? Or was it the byproduct of some fantastic form of life? Welcome to Adaptive Difficulty, where we ask the question, books are not movies, but what if they could be? And I guess also, movies are not books, but what if they could be?
This week, we're discussing the 1968 movie, 2001, A Space Odyssey, written by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, which was co-developed alongside the book version that was written just by Arthur C. Clarke.
Hello, I'm Josh.
And I'm Cameron.
Where were you at with 2001 before this week?
I had seen it once, and I had seen it in the middle of a classroom.
What grade level?
So I was a teacher.
Oh, okay.
So as in I saw
so
it.
You showed this to middle schoolers?
No, Josh. I student taught for sophomores.
Okay. Was this a film class or?
So this was a gen ed kind of class where it's like science fiction and fantasy. I think it was called contemporary fiction. And the teacher mostly focused on science fiction.
And I assume a class of public high school sophomores found this enthralling.
Well, they were mostly seniors because it seemed like the kind of class that was an easy class.
You take because it's easy and you don't need any more credits.
Which is very frustrating when you're the teacher and you actually care about the material.
But you're evading my question, which was, did any of those high schoolers care about this movie?
There were a few that liked it. I don't know how much of them will remember it after they graduated.
What did you think of it at the time?
I liked it. I mean, seeing it over the course of like 3 days is not the best viewing experience.
Yeah, I could see doing 2 just at the intermission, but that's a little bit of an odd split because most of the movie is before the intermission. So.
Well, also, we only had 50-minute classes.
Right, yeah, I assume that's why, but it's just awkward to show a movie with an intermission in 3 separations that are not based on the intermission.
The intermission did remind me of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which also has an intermission.
All good movies have an intermission.
And it's nice when they respect the audience.
I take it you hadn't had any experience at all with the book then?
No. I knew it had a book. I interpreted it as more as like it was an adaptation of the book rather than what it actually is, which is they were co-developed at the same time.
Right. So for anyone who doesn't know, and this is the version of events I got from like the foreword to the book, so it's not very detailed, but basically Kubrick wanted to make a science fiction movie and had read some of Arthur C. Clarke's fiction, so he called him up and was like, you're a hard science fiction guy, like help me make a movie. And Arthur C. Clarke was willing to, so they started developing. They started primarily on the screenplay, and then once they got, I think they said like 3/4 or so of the screenplay was basically done, they kind of diverged and started making the movie versus the book, and work on the movie would get incorporated into the book and vice versa. So there was never really any like, the book is like the official versions, and then the movie is like a summary of it, or the other way around. They were both constantly affecting each other.
Although I do think most people would consider the movie the definitive version, if only because it was more famous.
It's that thing that's also happened with like, I don't know, some other movies we've covered in the past, I guess maybe Blade Runner, where like, or No Country for Old Men, where the movie is the, like, one of the crowning examples of its genre in movies. The book is well liked, but not held in as high of a regard, I guess, usually.
Yeah, the movie is more groundbreaking, and the book is not.
For its format.
Yeah.
On my end, I saw this of my own accord when I think I was in 8th grade, maybe 7th. I think it was one of the first movies made for adults where I just checked it out of the library and watched it of my own volition.
And you were downhill ever since.
Which is a weird choice, but I guess it was just famous enough and I liked sci-fi. I liked it at the time, although I'm so far removed from my experience of that I don't know how much of it was like, did I really like it or was I just a pretentious 8th grader? But
I mean,
or is there any difference in those things, ultimately? But then I hadn't seen it for over a decade, but I actually watched it about a year ago and I was like, oh, it still rips. So I was right as an 8th grader.
Your ego will never recover.
I swear I read at least some of the book, and I thought I had read most of the book and then just given up and decided it was not as good when I was younger. But now, reading it now, my memories of the book were so off base that I don't know if I even actually read it or I just was like skimming it so hard. Because I swear I remember the apes talking and like having dialogue, which just...
That's not true.
It's not true. So, I don't know. And I remember having an impression that it was not just like hard sci-fi, but it was very dry. And I think that's not true. It has better prose than I remember. It's fairly smooth flowing.
It just strikes me as perhaps you weren't in the right headspace whenever you started reading it.
Yeah, it may have just been above my pay grade at the time. And unlike the movie where you can just sit and watch pretty colors, even if you're not getting anything from it, you have to actually read a book. But that's where I was coming from. Basically, I really liked it, but didn't have a strong memory of it. And I was familiar with the book, but I spent years being like, oh, the book stinks, like, just watch the movie.
That's interesting, because I mean, I definitely liked the movie, and despite the fact that I watched it in 3 kind of clips, it was still a good experience.
I guess my main curiosity is, what did you think?
My impression of the book, and it kind of ties into my kind of comparing it to the movie, the book feels a lot more philosophical than the movie does, which I mean is honestly not unexpected considering books have the capacity to have long extended prose sections where they engage with philosophy and humanity's relationship with the cosmos, other beings in the universe, that kind of thing. But I just got this distinct impression as I was reading it that Arthur C. Clarke was very interested in how humanity is impacted by this and how going from the very, very past to the very, very future is something that he's like interested in. Whereas I felt like in the movie, I felt it was more of he wanted to make a kind of cool, kind of semi-mystery kind of thing with lots of pretty colors and cool visuals.
I think that's doing a disservice to the movie to a degree. I would almost say it feels to me that the movie, I would say both works feel equally philosophical to me, at least within their mediums. But the movie is almost more mystical in its like approach, because you have this like unknown. It feels, because it drops a lot of hints that it could be aliens, especially if you've read the book. I think the hints are easier to notice in the movie, because I had not noticed them in the past. But there's also just this sense of things that are bigger than you occurring and sort of going along for the ride. Whereas in the book, you get an exact explanation of what's going on, even if it's not fully resolved. Like, you don't get exactly why this is happening, but you get exactly who is doing it and the history of the endeavor.
And that might be what I'm thinking about when I'm kind of saying this, because that was my impression too. And I think because you don't get direct answers in the Kubrick in the movie version, it feels like it's more focused on the mystery element of it rather than how humanity connects inside this larger kind of universe that C. Clarke is kind of developing. I
will say, this is kind of my first overarching note I had, or interesting point I found in the movie, or in the book. It really was, although I just said all that stuff about the movie being more mystical, it really had more somewhat religious overtones than I expected. And I have a few different things I noticed about that. So both the book and the movie open on the dawn of man, which is apes, 3 million-ish years ago. Okay, in the book it's called Primeval Night, not Dawn of Man. But there's 2 tribes of apes, and they don't like each other, but they're just kind of coexisting. And then the black monolith shows up and starts to teach them how to use technology and these things. One thing I noticed is that the main character, Moonwatcher, the main ape, he gets a vision of what they say are fat apes. So like all the apes in his tribes are muscular and their ribs are showing and they're skinny. And he gets a vision of fat apes and dreams of like a world where you can have an abundance of food, which I think is a reference to the possibility of developing farming. But he's discontented when he realizes that you can be a fat ape. And that had like Genesis parallels to the sense of the monolith is eating from the fruit of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Including the monolith makes them get tools and kill each other, much like Cain and Abel. So I thought that was interesting because it's the concept of the novel, if you just explain it to someone, is like explicitly atheist because it's like there's apes that evolve and aliens interfere and humanity transcends with the help of just aliens. You know, it's not like Dave Bowman goes to heaven at the end of the book.
Well, I mean, he kind of does.
Yeah, which I guess is what I ended up realizing. There is a line, to directly quote the book, that says something like, the apes, as they progress and turn into humans, peopled the sky, not altogether inaccurately, with gods. And I think the altogether inaccurately was saying the aliens are, they're giving their religions credit for what the aliens are doing.
Yeah. And there is a line later on where they talk about the aliens that came by and like their future, their kind of trajectory. And it ends with that chapter being like, well, what else is there after they've ascended past the need for physical forms that's not God? So I think the religion aspect is certainly prevalent.
I noticed that because there's sort of it kind of gives you the evolutionary ladder that Arthur C. Clarke is imagining, which is human, alien with more advanced evolution than human, sensory brain, which is a creature that is just a brain and its neurons still existing, and then a machine brain, which would be a human brain that's managed to intermingle with robots and artificial intelligence, and then mind without matter, or a spirit, and that's when it says beyond that is God. So I just thought it was noteworthy, the whole, here's what the evolutionary path beyond a human is. I just thought it was interesting. And again, that it tied back into the religion.
And that's the kind of thing that when I look at the movie, because in the movie it's a lot less clear that the monolith is actually doing anything. Like, it's still clearly alien origin, but it's not actively teaching them to do things. And so when you watch the movie, you're like, the Moonwatcher, or the version of Moonwatcher that's in the movie, when he's learning how to do tools, it seems more that it's springing out from the natural curiosity that he just kind of demonstrated when he was observing the monolith, and now he's doing curiosity elsewhere. So it feels a lot less at the hands of, intelligent design, almost.
Yeah, I mean, I feel if you are just watching 2001 without the novel or prior knowledge of it, I think and you're trying to think, like, what is going on here? The first thing that you realize is, well, every time these monoliths show up, something weird happens. And that's kind of your first key into the plot. But I agree that scene is pretty inscrutable on your first experience of it. Having established that this book is about God, I have my reading of the book. I don't know if it applies to the movie as much, which is that this is actually Space Moby Dick. And I base this pretty much entirely on the line near the end where a chapter starts with the phrase, "Call it the Stargate," which is a reference, I would say, to "Call Me Ishmael."
There is a
Dick.
Ahab line in this book.
Yes, and when Frank Poole dies, which is the guy who goes out to fix the antenna, and then Hal launches his pod at him, he dies, but he has like a leftover twitch nerve that waves, which is something Ahab does when he dies in Moby Dick. So that was probably what primed me to think about this. But I think what's happening is, and I had to get into my reading of 2001, I have to get into my reading of Moby Dick, which is...
So buckle up, folks.
Well, I can do it. I think Moby Dick, in a large part, is about the what do you call it? Enlightenment or humanism drive to try and classify everything and understand everything. And what the main character and what Ahab are trying to do in Moby Dick is understand a giant whale as if it is like a psychological being that you can understand the same way you can understand the narrator of a novel or yourself or a fellow man. And that's just impossible. You can't do that to a force of nature or God, which a lot of people, put into Moby Dick and is probably true. And so I think he's making deliberate references in 2001 to this idea of trying to actually understand other species. The aliens are trying to do that whenever they're like planting and observing. Hal is trying to do that in like manipulating the ship to his own ends. And that's also like the ultimate goal of artificial intelligence, which Hal is to accomplish that in a way in both directions, both us making ourselves as AI and AI looking back at us, trying to be us. So that was just the most interesting rabbit hole my thoughts went down while I was reading.
That all makes sense. So I do think there's an element in kind of the futility aspect of it from the aliens' point of view, where they are fundamentally changing these creatures to be more like them in their pursuit of trying to understand them. And there's a line of they're kind of unspooling Dave's kind of memories of life. And he says they're going to be stored somewhere safer. But at the same time, he's still kind of losing his consciousness and who he is as a person to become a star child at the very end.
Right. And I think it goes into, both the alien plotline and the computer plotline of this novel, I think what relates them is actually that they function in similar ways. Like the way that, first I'll say, did you notice that the way AI is described in the novel is actually very close to how AI is actually developed now?
Yeah.
Which I thought, that was just interesting to me, because you would not expect that to be like the thing it gets right, I guess. Because you think more about traveling to Saturn or Jupiter, and but it actually specifically mentions neural networks, and the fact that the AI is like trained millions of times on the tasks, which is how learning models are developed.
I wouldn't say that it's that surprising, because I think there were already discussions at that time of like how this would theoretically work. It
was already a field of research, and there was a program called ELIZA that was like primitive, but it was mainly like call and response sort of trick AI, but it was definitely something people were theorizing. And it's how chess, computers have worked for a while, just in a more primitive way. But I think there's a deliberate parallel to the fact that what the aliens are doing is going throughout the universe, seeding these monoliths throughout the world, and they're not necessarily guaranteeing that every species they do this to, it says, will ascend consciousness, but they're doing it millions of times, and the species that they're training, it says they're rewarding with pleasure or pain, the same way that you tell an AI or anyone you're training behaviorally, like, here's a point for doing the right thing, we're taking away a point for doing the wrong thing to get it to learn. Did you see that parallel, or do you think do you think I'm off the rails on that?
I don't think you're off the rails. It wasn't my focus as I was looking at this.
What was your focus?
My focus was on...
I've been talking a lot.
The humanity of Hal as a robot, and whether or not he actually has emotions and why he does the things that he does. Because the idea is that he has these two conflicting ideas of like, he's always supposed to tell the truth, but he's also supposed to keep the secret, and tying that into kind of the moral quandary of, I'll bring up Kantian ethics, where the idea is you're never supposed to lie whatsoever. But then people always point out, there are situations where lying is a good thing, and how do you square that kind of philosophical conundrum happening on a computer program? And the way they characterize Hal in the book is I feel like a lot more human than how they characterize him in the movie. And so here it's like he's confronted with these two things, and the only thing he knows how to do is kind of run away and avoid responsibility by breaking the connection to Earth, so he no longer has to think about it, kind of thing. And so that was the interesting part for Hal, for me, was seeing how human Hal is, and then also kind of maybe how human the aliens are as kind of an extension of that. Because I do agree that they are connected in that way.
To go back and just elaborate on the Kantian ethics, because I don't know as much about it as you do. Am I correct that it's not... Truth is like the example people use, but it's not specifically truth. It's more that you should live your life by maxims that you can always follow?
Yeah, and the maxim that Kant himself brings up is the idea that you should always tell the truth.
You should always tell the truth.
And the reason that is because the idea is that if you have to, when you're creating your maxims, you have to imagine a world where the opposite is true. And for him, when you do this with like, oh, you should tell the truth, always tell the truth, the opposite of that is you should always lie. well, when you do that, lying ceases to kind of be functional, because if everyone is lying all the time and everyone knows it, you don't trust anybody, so lying's not effective anymore. So telling the truth is kind of a necessity that comes out of that. And then people always bring up, well, if Nazis knock on your door and ask where are the Jews, where have you seen any Jews, and you're hiding them up in your attic or whatever, like most people would say, tell them no. Kant seems to suggest that you should say yes, although whether or not that's accurate to Kant is another question entirely.
I think it's clear in the book and the movie, and I think this is just I think the plot of the How section is probably the closest that the plots get between the book and the movie. So it's the same. It's just that the movie, even when it's not 20 minutes of pretty lights, the movie still has a very understated way of revealing that it has a plot at all. So it can be tough to track, even in the How section. Yeah. But it really just comes down to the fact that he realizes if he just kills all the humans that he interacts with, then he never has to lie. But I think it pushes him towards the inhuman to think that, 5 murders is a solution to this problem.
I mean, did we not just see in the Ascent of Man section that murder was the solution? Like, that feels very human to me.
You're talking about the apes?
Yeah.
But I don't know that the book is saying that was I get what you're saying, like, an ability and an understanding of violence is something that the movie and book are saying is part of humanity. But I think there is a point that even the movie and book would agree on where you're giving over to cold logic, and that also is a form of inhumanity that Hal is exhibiting.
I guess that's true. I don't know. He felt more cold and logical, and this is probably just kind of how the voice design works and how the visuals work in the film for the film. And also him, so when he kills the people who are there in hibernation, it feels very cold and calculated because you're just kind of sitting there watching him happen. Whereas in the book, it's like the airlock is released, so there's a lot of things happening from your perspective, from the main character's perspective. So they're dealing with all that kind of stuff, and you're not really kind of grasping with it. So it becomes as kind of a shock, and kind of, it feels more like a crime of passion in that moment than the coldly sitting there staring and watching the live signs dip away.
Yeah. It is interesting because that's true. It does feel more passionate in that way. But also in the book, he releases the airlock just on the suspicion or like the intuition that Dave is about to figure him out and shut him down. Whereas in the movie, he doesn't do anything like that until Dave is actively on the way to the server room that would shut him down. Because in the book, he releases the airlock and then Dave is like, oh crap, I got to go get to the server room because this is bad. And it's the other way around in the movie.
Well, I mean, I feel like when I was reading it, it felt very clear to me, and some of this is just because I've seen the movie, that Hal was going to always cause these issues. And the characters kind of suspected this far earlier than I necessarily think in the movie. Because in the movie, it's like he gets things wrong, and they're concerned about what he's going to do about it. But I think in the book, it's more of like, he's made this decision, he's going to go wake up the other crews to kind of help him do this stuff because he doesn't want to deal with anything, doesn't want to deal with Hal because he doesn't trust Hal anymore. And that's when the shit hits the fan in that regard.
I will say, as I was reading, I was like, the AI is actually pretty accurate to how AI works right now. But the least realistic part is that Hal gets one thing wrong and they all set out to kill it as soon as possible. Whereas AI in real life is just constantly wrong. And all its fans are like, it's good that it's wrong.
Well, it probably matters more to them considering they're hurtling through space at 1,000,000 miles per hour.
But they claim that it's never been wrong about anything. Although this, and I hadn't thought of this until just now, that does bring up the question of how it is able to fail 50% of the time at chess. Because wouldn't that require it to know the winning move, but choose a lie?
Yeah, but that's what that line in the book means, is that they choose to ignore that fact that that's what he's been programmed to do. So he's not getting it wrong because he's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Right. But that just seems like a smaller version of the same conflict he has about having to tell the truth, but also keep a secret. He has to be right all the time, but also deliberately lose at chess.
Well, I think that being right all the time does not necessarily always mean you have to win at chess. Those feel like different strands of logic. Like, they're definitely related, but I just feel like I can always want to be right and still lose at chess.
Because you made the wrong move.
But if I'm doing it on purpose, I didn't really make the wrong move. I mean, I did, but because I know that I did, it's not a wrong move anymore.
Okay.
Because, like, let's say you're teaching...
So then you...
let's say you're teaching someone how to play chess, and you're teaching them different strategies and openings and kind of thing. You are not going to play a perfect chess game, even if you could. If you're trying to teach them, you're trying to show them, if your opponent does this, this is what you should do. Or if they do this, and this is a slightly worse version of that. So you're showing them different variations.
That's true.
It's also possible that he doesn't treat all these kind of requirements to the absolute maximum.
In the movie, they have a conversation. Dave has a conversation with Hal where he just is kind of like, one or the other of them mentions that they think there's some extremely odd things about this mission. And that is a more direct foreshadowing than anything that happens in the book, I think.
Yeah, because the most you get in the book is you get that line, and it's a pretty direct line where it's one of the omniscient narrator sections where telling us that Hal has this secret mission that no one is even supposed to know, and that it's not going to be good for any of them kind of thing.
So they just kind of ported that into dialogue, I guess, because you only have so long to both establish this weird reality of living on a, ship headed to Jupiter and do this plot line. You need some sort of anticipation of it. And then in the book, whenever Hal is kind of figuring them out, it's because they're talking in euphemisms, but they're like fully aware that he can hear them. But they're just kind of saying things like, well, someone on this ship is not pulling their weight around here type of things. And Hal knows it's about him. But in the movie, that's the conversation in the pod where they really believe that they're out of Hal's hearing range, and they are, but he can read lips.
I just don't know why you wouldn't expect a super sophisticated computer that can take in visual input not to be able to read lips.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can see why it would be that way in the movie, because it's the more interesting visual it's more layered to like have a conversation in the front, but the audience can put two and two together that they can see Hal in the back. But I almost wonder if it's different in the book because Arthur C. Clarke thought the astronauts were behaving too dumb and he objected on those grounds or something. Because he seems like the type of writer that would raise that objection.
Because when I was watching that scene, when they were in the pod, and they tell them to turn it around, I'm like, why would you tell them to do that? Like, I don't see why they needed to be able to turn around and then start talking where the glass tube is kind of there. I feel like my first thought would be, just let's not face him at all. But
I guess the idea is that that's how they entered, so they wanted the air escape area to be facing the opposite way of the ship, so that nothing, like, if the pod is here and that's how they enter from the ship, they want the entrance to the pod turned around so that any sound that's getting out is going the wrong way,
I guess.
And then the last thing I have about Hal is I think the look of his server room in the movie is one of my favorite, like, tactile visuals.
Yeah.
When he's like pulling all the memory cards out and they're lighting up. Also an not obvious maybe, but a clear inspiration for the finale of Interstellar, I think.
I've not seen Interstellar.
Oh, well. In Interstellar, he is in this like interdimensional portal at the end, and he has to like sort through all these different strands and stuff. And he's in just kind of a shapeless but geometric room that he's banging on the wall. And actually, I think Christopher Nolan was heavily involved in the 4K restoration of 2001 back when it was made. So there's some evidence that that's an actual inspiration.
Yeah, I also am a big fan of that whole sequence. Because I really like how Hal's like the only one who's speaking throughout most of it until the very end whenever Dave feels bad for him. And it's like, I'll talk to you and you can sing to me kind of thing as I'm slowly murdering you. But that whole sequence, and just, I like the colors. Turns out I like movies that have colors in them. A comparison to, I don't know, did you see Gravity?
When it was in theaters, so I was like 14.
Yeah, I think about those kinds of movies, and they just all look so dull in comparison. Maybe not Gravity specifically.
I remember liking Gravity. I think the big thing is people always criticized it once it was not in theaters, because it's one of those movies where the fact that it is in 3D is really key to the experience of it.
I do wish I could have seen this movie, 2001, in theaters, because I think it would have been very fun.
Yeah, that is kind of one of my like movie bucket lists. It's in theaters pretty frequently even now.
Yeah.
Especially like 70 millimeter, like huge IMAX type screens, because it was filmed on 70 millimeter film. That would be very cool to see. And then what do you want to talk about next?
I mean, so the thing that sticks out most to me in terms of the movie is the audio design and just the sound design in general. is, I think, pretty much all the music. And I really think mostly about those moments when they're in space and you can only hear the astronauts breathing because that's the only thing that they would be hearing, and how it can cut from one shot where it's them and you can hear the breathing to kind of a wider shot out in space and you can't hear anything. And I was thinking a lot about how it's very similar in like doing that back and forth. Like that's the kind of thing that I think a modern studio would do a couple times and then stop doing. And in the same way that like when we were talking about Pirates of the Caribbean with the skeletons and the going back and forth between human and skeleton form is kind of a thing that takes a lot of time and lots of people wouldn't do or wouldn't even notice to think about. But when it happens, it's like, oh, this is an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I don't know how you list. Did you watch this with headphones on?
I did.
Okay. So I don't know if your headphones got like an audio signal that replicated this, but I actually recently got my home sort of theater set up with surround speakers. So I was able to hear surround effects. And the breathing is put on the surround speakers, it might be also on the front ones, but you can very obviously go from the kind of a full sound to you're just hearing to your sides when they're in space, the breathing. It's very interesting because it's almost like placing you in their head, even though you're watching in third person. And this movie was released with, I think, almost all Stanley Kubrick movies were released in mono speaker, except for this one, which was released in a 6-speaker format that no longer exists. So it did have surround sound in theaters. So that was very interesting. Otherwise, the surround sound mainly just, made the music sound fuller and things. But I thought that effect was very notable. It just made it feel sharper, I guess, and more obvious that that's what was happening.
And that's why I feel like because I'm of the opinion that this movie could probably be about 20 minutes shorter and probably just as good. Because I think there are a couple of sequences that go on a little bit too long. But I didn't really mind any of the middle sequences where they're kind of going out and fixing the ship and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I have 2 thoughts on this. I think that, well, first I'll just say a fact, which is after the first screening of this movie for critics, which was very divisive, some of them were, it's a masterpiece, Kubrick has done it, and others were, he's lost his mind, he's gone off the rails, like this is nothing. He immediately cut, I think, 10 minutes from the script or from the movie between that screening and the like true global premiere. And I've never seen, maybe someone has said it, but I've never seen someone specifically say what it was. But it was apparently 10 minutes that was considered very repetitive. And I think it was when they do the spacewalk and install the antenna, I think it was them coming back from that, is my guess. Because that very hard cuts back into.
I did notice something like that in that area. I did see a fact that apparently the opening, like black silence that the movie starts and ends with, like after the credits, apparently was much longer, and it was like the full length of those songs. And so you were sitting there like waiting for the movie to begin for like 10 minutes.
It's already not very common for credits to last for a song to last significantly longer than the credits it's covering. So it would be crazy if it was even longer. But my actual 2 thoughts are, whenever I watch this movie, I'm just like, this movie feels like it's like carved out of stone. It was always going to exist, and Kubrick just discovered it, and can't, like, it's like trying to suggest an edit for this movie is like suggesting cliffs get eroded in a different way, or, it's like, you just can't do it because it's so statuesque. That being said, I think the moon sequence is the weakest.
Yeah. So when I was first starting to watch it, I was thinking like, and this is not like a super hot take, but I was thinking about it in the context of like ballet, and I don't know if it's because I'm thinking about like the Timothée Chalamet controversy currently going on right now, but I was thinking of it in terms of ballet is one of those forms of storytelling that I've only seen maybe like one actual show, and it was probably the Nutcracker when I was young, and it was almost certainly an abridged version of the Nutcracker. But there is something like extra and prolonged about, I shouldn't say there is, I perceive ballet as there being something extra, kind of grandiose. It's kind of very extreme in like how it's presenting its story, and I get the kind of same vibe from that. So on some level, I agree with you that like it's like asking you to change how evolution works or how erosion of a stone works. But on other points, I'm like, you could probably cut off like 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there, and like 2 minutes there, and like,
yeah, but it's almost to me. Okay, first, Where do we stand on Timothy?
My stance on Timothée Chalamet is he's in the wrong for various reasons.
Coward.
Are you supporting Timothée Chalamet?
I'm sure there are things he does that are wrong. But I think I just want to also, I'll go down with the ship. I don't know. And I think all he was saying that ballet and opera are currently irrelevant to most people, which is just a fact. He was not expressing his own opinion of watching ballet and opera. He was talking about their relative popularity, and he was not wrong about that fact. So,
but I think in the context of other things he said, where he says he doesn't want to be in indie films really because he doesn't like, he wants a bigger role kind of thing. He wants more kind of global impact, which is a fine opinion to have. But when you kind of put that and add that to his comments about, and maybe it's just the way he said those kinds of things, but it just comes off as being ruder than perhaps he meant it to be.
Yes, and I think part of that is he, for some reason, is addicted to method acting, whatever his latest Oscar-nominated role is. So last year he was Bob Dylan for 3 months, and this year he's been Marty Mauser for 4 months or whatever. I just don't think it was... Also, it's funny to make 3 breakfasts and then eat one, so...
I don't know, Josh. It's a little wasteful and a little in poor taste, in my opinion.
The article says other actors ate it. Nobody reads the article.
We just read the Reddit headline.
I don't know if that happens every day. I mean, that seems like a lot of breakfasts to make and hand out. So probably some days they don't all get claimed. But the one day they were talking about, some other actor was like, yeah, I ate his leftover. So,
but was that a protest by that actor? Were they allowed to do it?
Okay, I'm ready. If it is happening that people are like suffering Timothée Chalamet's extra breakfasts because he's so hard to work with and keeps ordering too many, I'm ready for that like full expose to drop, and then I'll be on the people's side. To get back on track, when you say the thing about trimming 2 minutes here and there, it reminds me of Lord of the Rings, which my family owned the DVDs of the theatrical Lord of the Rings when I was young, and I never cared about them. And then we watched them. You were there. We watched them in college, the extended versions. And that was when I finally got it, because the point of Lord of the Rings is not to be a tightly plotted theatrical experience. The point of Lord of the Rings is to just exist with all your favorite people, all your favorite hobbits and dwarves for 12 hours.
I understand that.
So the extended editions to me actually get more at the heart of what you want out of Lord of the Rings. Because even though people say, well, they're just for super fans, Peter Jackson claims the theatrical cut is actually the better. I think that kind of misses the main appeal of it to me. And 2001: Space Odyssey does not have my favorite hobbits and dwarfs. It barely even has humans that I care about.
Can you imagine that mashup? Like Frodo Baggins talking to Hal.
Tell me 2 things they might say to each other. I'm
Frodo Baggins. I'm Hal 9000, and that's the it.
No, you can't no sell it like that. This is a nothing thought, so I'm making you make it something.
Don't make me, Josh. I'm sure you could have a plot. Hal's calculating all the different ways you could destroy the ring in more efficient ways than what the story's about.
Oh my god, he's a Redditor.
He's a you should fly the eagles to Mordor kind of robot.
So I think, but in the same sense, like the point of 2001 is to watch these beautiful space ballets and visuals and to almost meditate as you watch. So I think when you start talking about, well, you could make it a more bearable experience by 2 minutes here and there, you're losing the plot of what it is. Fully acknowledging that Kubrick did actually trim 10 minutes from it for reasons like this. But
honestly, like none of the parts really bother me, except I think that perhaps the space gate sequence doesn't need to be 10 minutes, which maybe I would feel differently if I was, tripping acid or something, which apparently is what happened and why the movie was a success.
It was a mainstream success even when it came out, which is kind of crazy to think about. Can you imagine if this movie did not exist currently and did not have any like prerequisite in culture that it would come out and be considered a hit?
No. It would be pretentious.
Yeah, but that's what happened in 1968. I guess people were just so into the anticipation of the space race and Kubrick himself. My point about the moon is not the space ballet, which I think is fine. It's the scenes inside the ships. They just switch between too many ships because they take a ship onto the space station and then they have a meeting on the space station. And then they take a ship from the space station to the moon and have a meeting at the first part of the moon. and then they take a shuttle from the moon to the crater they're going to see. And I just feel like you could maybe switch it to one ship to the space station and one ship to the moon.
But Josh, the space stations were my favorite. My favorite was the boob ship.
And also that space station is definitely Star Wars, where Star Wars got a lot of its. Yeah. My wife was mentioning this, and I was like, yeah, you're right. So I have some rapid fire notes from the book. The opening section, especially the omniscient narration that's kind of talking about what's going on and the progress of evolution and the steps of man, really gave me Spaceship Earth vibes, which is our ride at Disney World. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the one in the big ball at Epcot. Mm-hmm. And it was actually written by Ray Bradbury, so a fellow science fiction. And its whole shtick is that it's like the history of humanity, but through the perspective of the development of writing forms. So it's like, here's the Phoenicians who invented the early concept of an alphabet, and here's cuneiform tablets, and here's writing on parchment, and here's the printing press, and here's newspapers, and it ends, around the internet or whatever, which is very sci-fi writer thing to make a theme park ride about. Mm-hmm. And I just felt a lot of kindred spirit in those opening moments with that. There's also, you can tell when this book was written to a degree because of the weird overpopulation, like fear-mongering. Did you register
I despise every time it pops up in any kind of fiction. I just despise it.
Because that was definitely this whole sense, and the Earth has at least twice as many, if not like 4 times as many people as when this book was written. And yes, they're not all fed, but to not get off track. When they mention the overpopulation, the only like specific people group they mention is a third of them in the Chinese Empire, which was just very xenophobic to be.
Yeah.
Like, the Earth is going to overpopulate and 33% of them are going to be Chinese. So,
well, it's like that moment.
I didn't love that.
Like, they're talking about the pods and they're like, the pods are fickle. That's why they're named after women. And in the movie, they're just called Pod B, but in the book, they're called like Pod Betty.
Yeah, it's actually crazy because this is an example where the movie was actively just making the better choice in both cases, and then the writer of the book could have just done what the movie did and chose to add in a little bit of racism and sexism just for fun.
I can't believe the C in Arthur C. Clarke stands for canceled.
And Stanley Kubrick did nothing wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
So
never once.
The toilet joke is in both.
Perfect in both of them.
It fits their format, because in the movie, it's just like he looks at the long list of rules, and then you cut like almost as soon as you register what you're looking at. In the book, it's like a whole scene where you like are in, like you go into the toilet with him and experience.
I swear it's its own chapter in the book, because like this book has very tiny chapters. I swear it's its own chapter. There's like a chapter on the daily life of taking that shuttle from the space station to the moon, and it's in there. Speaking of daily life in space, I think the concept of like Velcro socks and shoes is it feels obvious, but I can see how it would be very impressive and like novel when you first like see it for the first time.
I think it still is cool to see when the movie does it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I mean. Like when I say it's not, I'm not saying it's not cool now. I'm saying that it feels like when you look back on it, like, well, of course, like if you were thinking about it, like, that's an obvious thing.
How would you do it? And then, yeah, that's true. And I think that is something, I guess this is the property of hard science fiction, but I feel like this story in general, whichever format, is good at, if the solution, even though it's science fiction, is obvious and boring, it just uses the obvious and boring solution. It doesn't like reach for the exciting one or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably one of the things it's most correct about is that it predicts tablets and the internet. He just straight up is reading an iPad or whatever on the ship.
I wrote down, when I was watching this film, the movie accurately predicts how awkward FaceTime calls are.
Book has a line, the more wonderful the means of communication, the more trivial, tawdry, or depressing its content seem to be. And that's just YouTube Shorts.
That's true.
It doesn't spend a whole chapter, or even close to a chapter, unlike the pooping, but it does euphemistically mention the fact that they are masturbating like every night.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, is this what they're doing? Like, this has to be like, there's no other way to interpret this like sequence.
Because they're like, oh, they used to call girls back home, but they got too far away and the girls kind of drifted away. So now there's like a pharmacopoeia of, interest for them, when they get lonely.
Is the implication in that sequence that they were just having like video phone call sex?
They were having phone sex, yes. They were having phone sex. Actually, they were the first streamers or whatever,
That's true.
sex streamers.
I just can't imagine masturbating when I know that Hal is like there.
Yeah. Is it more that if you do it though, like is Hal a cuck or are you an exhibitionist?
I think it's whichever one you want. So like, if you want to pretend that Hal's the cuck and you're fucking his wife, then like that's what the scenario is. Like that isn't that? I mean, and Hal's like, he's all enthusiastic about the mission and everything, but he wants to help make sure that everyone's happy and safe for the first part of the film. My bigger thing that now I'm thinking about is this is like a military expedition, so all these video calls have to be recorded and like are presumably being like processed by like national security people who are just having to listen to this guy have phone sex.
I'm sure this is something the military is familiar with because armies have been predominantly male soldiers who are lonely for literally millennia.
Yeah, and the solution was always just to fuck the dude next to you.
But think of how much quicker things would have gone wrong if they were like, Hal, I need you to keep a secret. Don't tell anyone what you saw.
You think like, would you as a scientist design a fleshlight that like pops out of the wall for them to use? And we can cut this out of the podcast.
I'm not going to cut it, but I'm not engaging with fishing for a clip that hard.
Fine.
We went far enough. And then, okay, I just saw this note, and we actually should have brought this up back when we were talking about Timothée Chalamet, because we know 2001: A Space Odyssey's stance on opera, because it mentions the minimal intellectual content that most operas contained.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know if you remembered that, but...
I saw it, and I was like, that's interesting. And I did briefly think about the Timothée Chalamet thing, and I just kind of moved on. It felt more like a kind of nothing joke than anything.
I was just reading it, and I was like, this sci-fi writer is so high up on his horse. Like, what I write is sophisticated for intelligent beings.
It's easy to dunk on opera. No one likes it. No one goes to it.
Yeah, it's true. I don't want to be like it. Unlike opera and ballet, my podcast where two men talk about movies is culturally relevant and timeless.
And unique. And timeless. You know the thing I liked most about the book, in comparison to the movie, is... And I know this is because the movie is only 2.5 hours, but how long it takes to kind of get to the journey, and you're seeing all these kind of astronomical events kind of going through it. Like the fact that like they go to Saturn in the book and not Jupiter, but they stop by Jupiter because it's on the way, and like the probe that they send into Jupiter and that kind of sequence, all of that felt very fun for me to kind of like visualize as I was reading. And it was something that I missed when I was looking at the movie, because I like Saturn more than I like Jupiter. But also, I think seeing, and this ties into my idea that the Arthur C. Clarke book is more interested in how humanity relates to the universe. And it feels much more personal in a lot of ways for Kubrick, just how film makes things more personal because you have more close-up shots of people's faces and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so seeing the kind of account of like science happening along the way feels interesting to me and kind of something I enjoyed in the book.
Yeah. I think one of the most like just purely pleasurable on like a prose and aesthetic level of the book is when they pass over Jupiter on their way to Saturn, and they talk about dipping into the atmosphere and out of the atmosphere. If I was smart, I would know what page that's on. So I can example here's the section I think I was thinking of. 1,000 miles ahead, the band of twilight was hurtling toward them. Behind, the sun was sinking swiftly into the Jovian clouds. Its rays spread out along the horizon like two flaming, downturned horns, then contracted and died in a brief blaze of chromatic glory. The night had come, and yet the great world below was not wholly dark. It was awash with phosphorescence, which grew brighter minute by minute as their eyes grew accustomed to the scene. Dim rivers of light were flowing from horizon to horizon, like the luminous wakes of ships on some tropical sea. Here and there they gathered into pools of liquid fire, trembling with vast submarine disturbances welling up from the hidden heart of Jupiter. It was a sight so awe-inspiring that Poole and Bowman could have stared for hours. Was this, they wondered, merely the result of chemical and electrical forces down there in that seething cauldron? Or was it the byproduct of some fantastic form of life? That was the section I specifically remember reading and thinking was very notable. And I think it's a good... If you're like me and your impression was, Clarke and his genre of hard sci-fi in general is detached and dry, I think it's a good counterexample of, yes, that whole sequence is based on like actual things we know about what the surface of Jupiter might be like, but written in a very poetic way that is very formally appealing.
I mean, I just like it. And I think there's tons of stuff like that. I really like the sequence when he's kind of in the binary star system of the red giant and the neutron star, and that kind of sequence of talking about all the different kinds of things that are happening there. So it's an enjoyable read. And it's one that I kind of also, in the same vein as you, did not anticipate necessarily based on what I knew about Arthur C. Clarke and most hard science fiction people.
Yeah. Well, the only one I have any other major experience with, we do not say his name on this podcast anymore. Alan Dean Foster.
Oh. I was like, are you talking about Ray Bradbury? What did Ray Bradbury do?
Because the only other science fiction writer we've read is Philip K. Dick, and I don't think he qualifies as a hard science fiction author. He's just a science fiction author. So,
yeah, no.
Alan Dean Foster managed to turn Star Wars into a hard science fiction novel. Somehow.
It's space fantasy, and that's what it should always be.
I was a little confused reading the book whether Clarke was aware that Jupiter is a gas giant. Like, I looked up whether that was knowledge we had at the time, because he mentions the possibility of going to its surface. But it seems that it would have been known, and he would have known. So maybe I was just confused.
And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know this. I thought the implication was that eventually the pressure got intense enough that
I think there is something of a core to gas giants, and maybe the core in a gas giant would be so huge that it would be a pretty notably big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it would still be a surface no matter what. So
there's some project he makes up that happened in like the 90s called Project Barsoom, where they tell humans that Martians are real and see how they would react. Barsoom is the name of Mars in the John Carter series by the author of Tarzan.
Author of Tarzan wrote that?
Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs. He wrote Tarzan, and he also wrote the John Carter, the Princess of Mars series, which is like John Carter goes to Mars, rescues a princess, has a bunch of adventures.
I saw the movie.
Yeah. They're not that far off as you would expect, because they're both Pulp Fiction from the era. I like Edgar Rice Burroughs. Those are both things we should consider putting on the list. John Carter's a Confederate, but we'll move past that.
The antithesis of the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, I guess.
Yeah, he's a Confederate that goes forward in time. Yeah. The book gives its biggest explanation of what's going on after Hal dies. There's like a chapter that's just straight up. And I mentioned the summary of it earlier, which is 3 million years ago, there was an alien race that had like transcended and developed interstellar travel, and decides to go around like seeding different potential life with the ability to advance by leaving these monoliths that communicate things to them. Do you think there's any room for this in the movie, or it could ever have possibly had it or been improved by it?
Specifically the chapter that's like about how this is the history of the civilization.
Of what's going on. Yeah.
I don't know, because
sorry to interrupt. I almost think if it was made now and you had access to almost perfectly fidelity CGI worlds, you could do it, but not at the time.
I just feel like the way it would happen if it was made today would be at the beginning there would be some indication of like cutting back to an alien ship that's like leaving the planet or something.
I think the movie AI by Spielberg, which was the story was developed by Kubrick, and he had, before he died, and then Spielberg kind of made it for Kubrick as a dedication to him. The ending where the aliens, or the futuristic robots are surveying planet Earth, I think you could do something that looks kind of like that, but on a galactic scale, and it could work maybe and still contain some mystery. But I don't think it would be a good idea. I think the movie ultimately made the right call for a movie.
Yeah, because it ditches the omniscient narrator kind of aspect throughout the rest of it. So might as well just not do it in this part as well.
Yeah, and I think there's something to the fact that the movie is mysterious and unexplained, gives it longevity as an object of discussion, and it kind of sticks in your mind or in your craw as like, what was going on there, in that movie I watched.
So mine has 2 forewords, and I can't remember which foreword it is in the book, but Arthur C. Clarke was complaining, not really, but pointing out that people got mad at him for explaining too much in the book version.
And that's what I said at the beginning. That used to be my opinion. I was like, well, he over-explains it. It took away all the mystery. And I think I like the mystery in the movie, but I was more receptive to reading a book and kind of with answers in it this time. And also, I don't think you could have written a book that's a full length of a novel and not have. I just don't think it would work
Yeah, no.
as a book.
No, it would have been
boring and pointless as a book.
And I think that, I mean, my opinion is you should probably watch the movie first and get that experience and then go read the book and then go back and watch the movie again.
Yeah.
Because that's what I did.
And there is more, because on the moon mission, they talk a lot about the cover-up that they're doing because it's the monolith. And then later, once Hal is dead in the movie, instead of the full exposition, you get that little briefing that was sent to Dave that's like, only Hal 9000 knows that, you know, this ship is on its way to the first evidence of intelligent life that's ever been discovered, which is, I think I missed the first couple times I watched, but there is more of a through line of, oh, there's maybe aliens happening in the movie than I think a lot of people are able to catch. At least me, not to blame other people for my ignorance.
I mean, based on what I recall from when I showed this to sophomores and seniors, it was a mixed class. It was mostly seniors, and they weren't always paying the most attention, but there was some confusion in that regard too, as well, with them.
So now I think I've covered everything I'm interested in, other than the encounter at Saturn/Jupiter and the Beyond the Infinite sequence. So I think first I'll note that the monolith was on a moon in the book, and it's just sort of floating out in space in the movie.
It's so much. I like the book version better of it being on the moon.
Yeah, I do too, for the plot. I just think it's more interesting to have to choose to approach it, because it's more of Dave making an active choice to, like, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to take the next step into it. I understand why they couldn't include this detail, because the planet had been changed to Jupiter, but the book, they're going to Saturn, and they use the real life fact that Saturn has a moon that's two-toned to speculate that maybe the aliens, like, added some sort of powder or coating to the moon as part of their scheme, which I thought was just an interesting way of using that real life fact. And then the book provides, and I don't see how it could have done anything else, but it provides an actual explanation for each step of the Beyond the Infinite journey. So he progresses from, he's just going through stars, sort of getting to the edge of the universe or whatever you want to say it is. And then he ends up in what they call like an intergalactic switch relay, where there's like a endless sky above him, and then below him is like a colorful grid with different blank rectangles in it, and each rectangle is like a different universe portal or something of the sort.
Yeah. It's very Expanse, if you've seen The Expanse or read The Expanse.
Yeah. It's also very Interstellar, to bring Interstellar back up. And then he goes through one of those and arrives at a huge sun and a white dwarf that's in very quick orbit around it. And there's like a fiery fusion cone going from the big sun to the white dwarf.
It's a neutron star, I think, not a white dwarf.
Oh, they say white dwarf at some point.
Do they?
For sure.
I could be wrong. I just thought they weren't.
That is what he's like looking into when he gets sent into the house. And so I was watching the movie and I was anticipating, I was like, I need to pay attention to this Beyond the Infinite section and see if it matches up with like these steps, but it doesn't. So
No.
It's just pretty lights for 20 minutes or 10 minutes, not 20, but you know, it's fine. I think
20 minutes would be egregious, Josh. You could never do that.
I like the lights that are coming forward to you more than I like the negative landscapes.
Yeah, that's the part I'm like, that's what I would cut if I was forced to choose to cut something and I had complete authority to do so. I thought most of the negative landscapes were uninteresting visually.
I would replace them with a different visual. I don't know that I would cut the time out necessarily, because I think you need it to almost make you numb a little bit so that it feels like you're being transported as an audience member.
And you can't do that in 8 minutes. You need 10 minutes.
Yes, exactly. The main other thing I noted is the room in the book is from a TV show on Earth, and he notices that everything is like only a couple years old, and it's because the monoliths relayed information to each other 4 years ago when they were discovered. So when the aliens were making the space for him, they only had information from 4 years ago, and that's what they used.
Which I found was an interesting detail kind of explanation. When I first saw the movie, I don't know if I liked the set design of that part of the movie. I come to appreciate it more now, having read the book.
Well, I think in the movie it's mostly just uncanny, because I can't think of any And I don't know tons about 60s television, so maybe it was recognizable to someone back then. But
it was the floor for me that made it uncanny, I think.
But can you imagine if it was like he showed up in I Love Lucy's house at the end of the movie?
Can you imagine if it was like a house from like Riverdale? Because that's the one that I would remember. Oh, you're still. I'm thinking in the context of it was made today, as opposed to if it was made in the 60s.
Oh, okay. I just meant it'd be weird if it was like a sitcom house, because I feel like you would in the book where it has time to explain it, it doesn't register as a joke. It registers as a twist. I think in the movie, if he just randomly ended up in a sitcom house, it would register as a joke, and then the movie would end, and it would be very strange. And then, but I think in the movie, whenever he goes to the mirror, do you think we kind of switch sides of the mirror in that moment? And that's kind of when we're permanently like have changed universes or realities that we're watching?
Well, I don't really perceive it as us changing realities or universes. I perceive it more as a kind of folding inward of time. The idea to me is that, you're just seeing snippets of this guy's life, and he's also seeing them like as they happen, and he's transferring kind of between them. And then he dies and becomes a star child because of the monolith. So for me, it was more of a folding of space and time. And there's not like a deliberate moment other than, I guess, probably entering the hyperspace and being brought there.
Okay. It's also interesting because in the book, he experiences his life backwards up until he's a baby and then becomes the star child. Whereas in the movie, he experiences rapid aging and then becomes the star child.
See, I'm of the opinion that he doesn't actually experience rapid aging. I think he just kind of generally lives there for the entire time. We just see moments where he's also seen.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I think that. Also, the book talks about his like journey. Now this would have been cool to include is like 10 more minutes of the star child flying through star fields and galaxies.
Yeah.
Because that's what's in the book. But it mentions, does the star child like wipe out half of Earth?
Okay, so I had this same thought, because at the very end, it's the star child comes back to the Earth because he's going to, I don't know, play with things. And it mentions that they send up nukes because that is kind of humanity's response. And so it says 1,000 miles below, he became aware that a slumbering cargo of death had awoken and was stirring sluggishly in its orbit. The feeble energies it contained were no possible menace to him, but he preferred a cleaner sky. He put forth his will, and the circling megatons flowered in a silent detonation that brought a brief false dawn to half the sleeping globe. So I couldn't decide if he was detonating them, like sending them back down onto Earth, or if he was detonating them in the atmosphere and getting rid of all the space debris. Because there's that earlier line where he says that Earth might have its own rings one day full of like the wrenches and all the trash from like previous space stuff. I also couldn't decide if he was wiping things out to kind of start over and
I think
God.
So I think reading it now, it's that humanity sees the star child, freaks out, launches all its nukes, and then the star child detonates them.
I just couldn't decide if it was in a way that was destructive and fatal for humanity, or if it was him just clearing the space around the Earth.
Yeah, I think it's destructive. And I think the idea is that he has kind of taken on the next level of human consciousness, and there's no need for individual human bodies anymore. He is like the human race manifesting itself as a force onto the universe.
It makes me so curious as to what the sequels of this book are.
There's 2. One of them's, I think, maybe 3. There's 3 sequels total.
I just can't decide how this happened. If the ending is that they wipe out the human race.
Yeah, I assume some things got retconned when he was like, I need some more money. It's interesting to me, though, because that's a very of its time ending for everyone to launch a bunch of nukes. Not that nukes are not still relevant, but constant paranoia about them, And I guess what's interesting to me is that I feel like the movie almost by accident, or maybe Kubrick is just that smart, very deftly avoids all the pitfalls that would have really dated the movie.
Yeah. And that is like one of his like stated goals is to make a sci-fi movie that lasts.
But, from Clark's perspective and possibly Kubrick's, it's like, well, we have nukes now. Like, we're always going to be paranoid about Russia launching nukes. Like, that must be forever. So it almost feels like a trip of luck that the movie doesn't end with nukes getting launched. And also, the book talks a lot about a US-USSR alliance, and I suppose it's against China.
Probably.
which I guess is
It feels
not
very
like, it's not a million
1984.
miles from reality, but the movie just kind of doesn't address it. Like the one character mentions being American, and other than that, it doesn't really get addressed. So again, another example of, and I guess it would have been obvious to scrub out modern day geopolitics if you're trying to make a timeless movie.
That's true.
Just interesting to think how they survive. I think that's everything from me.
Yeah, I'm thinking of any last thoughts.
I already know how I would, what metaphor I would assign this, since our usual rating system will not work.
Yeah, I guess that is true. What is your metaphor? We'll go there.
So to catch people up, usually we would assign it like, how hard is this to adapt? And we would make like a video game metaphor. But obviously, in this case, they were developed at the same time. So I'm saying 2001: A Space Odyssey is a video game. The movie is a video game. The novel is either a video essay or the official game guide.
I like the video essay angle, because it doesn't just feel like this is someone who's dug into all the lore and has given all their interpretations of all the things that are happening, and or have written some very bad fan fiction that they're going to read out to the people.
I also feel like someone tomorrow could be like, I rewrote 2001 solely based on watching the movie, and I would be like, cool, let's read it and see. Like, it feels like you could write two novels that both have valid points about it.
But how long is the video essay? That's the question. Is it like a 1 hour video essay? Is it like a 4 hour video essay?
It's one of those ones that's longer than the original work, for sure.
Okay.
And yeah, I think they're both good.
I think they're both good in the ways that they use their medium to the best effect they possibly could.
Yeah, I think the right person made them both. It's a good writer for the material. It's a good director for the material. It's kind of irrelevant to say, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey, I do just think is one of the most finely tuned and crafted movies ever made. Don't know that I think that about the book. You seem to like the book more than the movie.
Well,
maybe.
To me, I think I like the book more because I like thinking and the presentation of all the information in the book that you don't get in the movie. And I realize that, that's probably just going to always be true for me, and it's just kind of inherently true for books to be able to cover more information. And I like the movie. I don't think that I don't like the movie. I sat there and I was like, I enjoyed the dancing ballet spaceships throughout the entire thing. I enjoyed the long walk. I probably would have enjoyed the long walk back.
Okay, if you have been listening so far, thank you for listening. Please remember to rate us, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, Spotify, Apple, or your other choice. We are available by email at adaptivedifficultypod@gmail.com. We'll read anything that comes in. We're open to suggestions, comments, whatever you want to send our way. Another big help for us would be if you like the show and know anyone else you think would like it, recommend it to them, let them know we're out there. And again, thank you for listening. Cameron, do you have anything else you've been reading, watching, playing?
Well, as always, I'm trapped in the eternal torment that is it. It's a great book. I'm getting a little tired of it, but I still like it. I still think it's a very good book. The past and the present are blending together wonderfully.
I've been lying a little bit because I've been reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for like over a year because I have the French edition, but I only read it when I have the time and the motivation. So I read like 10 pages per month maybe because I'm usually busy catching up on what I need to read for this, or I'm too tired to read something in another language. But my goal is to get it done sometime. My recommendation that I'll give, because I think it's topical, I've been watching the first few episodes of Twin Peaks: The Return. You familiar with Twin Peaks?
So I've seen the first episode of the original part twice because we watched them both in college on separate occasions.
I think I was only there one of those times. I like Twin Peaks a lot, the original series. I've watched it once. Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me is the movie. It's very good. One of the more harrowing movies I've ever watched. Twin Peaks: The Return is much stranger because it, instead of being like a network TV show, it was fully given over to David Lynch. So I don't know how it goes, but I do think it has a lot of aesthetic similarities to 2001 in an odd way, in just, mostly dialogueless, long sequences, some of which are even possibly in space.
See, that statement is just so odd to me, having only seen the first episode.
Well, it really only makes sense in the return, not the main sequence. And I'm only saying it because it happened within the first 3 episodes, so I don't think it's that big of a spoiler, because there's 18 episodes of the return. But just this very methodical, meditative, but strange and possibly science fictional aspect. I didn't expect to connect those two things when I started watching this movie, but I was like, man, this is kind of like the Twin Peaks: The Return that I've been watching. So I wanted to bring that up. Also, I saw Hoppers, the new Pixar movie.
How was that?
It's pretty good. It feels slight, I guess. Like it just feels minor, but it's enjoyable. So
is it just Avatar?
No. They do get a beaver body and help the beavers against humans, but they're already wanting to do that. So I don't think it counts.
I just know that was what everyone's, first
they do specifically say it in the movie.
Oh, do they?
Like the main character's like, it's just like Avatar. And the scientist is like, it's nothing like Avatar.
I hate lampshading.
Avatar. So it's funny. I've seen people say it's the funniest Pixar movie. I don't know that that's true, but the second half especially does take some interesting turns that are pretty unexpected and wild. Anything other than slogging through the back half of it?
I wouldn't say I'm slogging through. I'm at the point where I want to be reading a different book. And usually I'm reading a book that I like and I enjoy, which is it currently. And I'm reading a book for this show. And so I don't have time to
which you always hate and dread.
Yeah, that's true. No, it just depends. And so I'm anxious for something different and hoping I can get it finished before this weekend.
All right, that does it for us. Next episode will be it'll be a short one on Marrying Mr. Darcy, the Pride and Prejudice card game, following up on our Pride and Prejudice episode. After that, our next main episode will be War of the Worlds. That will be the H.G. Wells novel, movie version to be decided.
Well, that's all, folks. As always, thanks to everyone who made this adaptation, or I guess not really adaptations this time, possible. Thanks for everyone who worked on the film, who worked on the book, just making the world just a little bit more artful. Thanks to you guys, the fans listening. Again, it's really nice that, we could speak into the void for an hour and a half at this point, and people are willing to listen to it. So yeah, join us next time with War of the Worlds.